What up, everybody? This is the Gems and Juice podcast. Of course, Figgy Fig, Ryan Rockett, and joined by the lovely Jasmine again. And we have a very special guest for us radio folk, for us indoctrinated in this radio game. We have a legend in the game joining us right now. A very big figure joining us in the radio game. We're going to talk about her start in radio, the future of radio, how radio's been, all kinds of questions, and we're going to pick her brain and have some fun. We have the operations manager of Radio One, Terri Thomas, joining us.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
Yes,
applause. Get the applause drop going, man. Yeah.
All right, I love
it. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, man, I'm very excited, honored to be asked. So thank you.
Yes, very happy to have you join us. Like we said, we've been in radio for a while, and we're always interested in other perspectives and, kind of peep game and see where the whole thing is going.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll start off with a wellness check with you. I know every industry has had a tough time this past year with the pandemic and whatnot. I know on our side of radio stations, it's been kind of tough. Every day we come in, we have that, we dread seeing the morning email that, somebody got let go. And it's walking on eggshells type of environment, but I think it's getting a little bit better now. So how have things been with you, business wise, personal wise, etc., in the last year or so we've had to deal with all this?
Well, I would say, one of the things that I'm known for is being a great coach. So I'm very connected to my team and the people that I work with. So the first kind of devastating blow was the mass furlough and layoff, that we had to do for economic reasons at the beginning of the pandemic. So, I just love coaching and growing teams and coaching and growing people. So that was really, really challenging. I would say 3/4 of the team got furloughed, a small percentage laid off, but mostly it's furloughs. So I would say I'm grateful for that, because furlough is you still get the tentacle, right? So, and there is a plan to bring back. We just started bringing back some furloughed people. So that's really been encouraging. For me personally, I went home kicking and screaming. I've always been a person who believes in being on the front line with my people. And so my boss, Vice President General Manager Pam McKay, she's like, look, Terri, you're the coach, let the players be on the field, you coach from the house, and we'll make it work. And so my very scaled down on air team, pretty much for the most part, were able to come into the office because we did so many furloughs. So it was very much a skeleton crew. And then I have been coaching more or less from the house. And so at first, I didn't know that it would be for me, but I would say it was very freeing, because I think, my passion of radio comes from being a little girl. And so I've always been very connected to the business. And I just was sort of, I don't want to say old school, but, I came up under what I call the triple OGs of the business. And, they were there, putting in the hours, feet, on the ground in the office, on the front line. And so, that's the doctrine that I subscribe to. But, understanding and embracing technology, which is also part of what excites me about the business, is the technology, really allowed us to operate a lot differently. So, it's been very unique and interesting. I will say this, as a coach, as a manager, as a strategist, the pandemic did allow me personally to create a better work-life balance for myself. So I think Jasmine could probably relate here as well. Being a woman in the game, and even still, it's still very much a man's business. And no shade to you gentlemen, appreciate your passion for wanting to explore, the stories of radio, but it still is very much a man's business, a male dominated industry. Well, think about me being a programmer, and a female programmer at that. And so, I'm a bit, I hate to say it, but I've been given the Trailblazer Award. When they first gave it to me, I was like, really? But then when I looked at how many women and so forth, I was like, well, I sort of guess so. So, as a woman in the business, we work 5 times as hard because we're trying to be taken seriously and get our credibility and all of that. So, my thought process was never to not be, right there on the front line with the crew. But, the technology really bridged the gap. We've been able to, band together as a unit and really work well. And then also being at home, like simple things, riding my bicycle every day, and, you know, certain things about self-care and wellness and mental well-being, which was a lot of the conversation and still is during the pandemic. You know, I really adopted a lot of those things. And then, you know, by the grace of God, have found it, or he found me, I would say, just got married, amazing husband, 4 beautiful girls, a dog, a cat. Life is grand. So, you know, some challenges for sure, but also a lot of positive things.
That's good to hear. And yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I do. We agree on our side as well. Like we appreciate the technology upgrades we've gotten as a result of this remote work thing. You know, I think it's been a boon, a blessing in disguise in a way. But yeah, it is tough dealing with the furloughs, and a lot of our good friends are no longer with the station. So that part is always rough. But you know, I think brighter days are ahead, and that's always a good thing.
Well, I think it also, just one note, it reminds us though, it reminds us that this is what we do, but it should not be who you are, you know? And so a lot of people in the business, this is all they know. And so when the business puts you down, because the business has no loyalty to people, you know, people buy into people. The companies are great, they're an ideal, but it's really about the people structure. And so I would have to say, it's going to sound terrible, but you know, the hard truth is it's not so much that companies have loyalty to people, right? So the business has no loyalty to us. You know, we'll work and do what we need to do for the length of time we're allowed to do so, but we all serve at the pleasure of the president, and the president being whoever happens to run the companies that we work for. So it's not to mean that we're not valuable or we do a great job, because so many people are furloughed and sitting on the beach that are highly qualified, talented, all the amazing things. It's really just, you know, for a lot of this has been a numbers game, and the fact that the industry is evolving and changing second by second by second. So, you know, I would just want to impress upon anyone that's listening to the podcast, love what you do, but don't allow it to be all of who you are, because that can be a tragic ending when whatever industry or business decides to sit you to the side and you have to sit there and reckon with yourself and you're not comfortable with who you are as a person. That is absolutely devastating. I won't name names because I'm sensitive to my peers in the business, but I know of people that have been put out the business and literally have died of a broken heart, lost their identities, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say it's a bit of a sobering thought, but just a reminder, like, look, love what you do, but it's not the totality of who you are.
I definitely had experienced that during being furloughed and then eventually laid off. Just loving my job, being stressed, but the good type of stressed, as to where, you know, you're still enjoying what you're doing, and then going from always being on the go, always planning something, to being at home, like, yeah, absolutely, I can relate. And this time was needed. I'm glad to have you on and to hear you, someone of your stature, say the same things. It makes me know that I'm on the right path.
Yeah. You are. Like, take the time to do what's necessary to make Jasmine happy and figure out what that is. And, you know, the path will unfold. When you align yourself with yourself, the path truly will unfold before you. You just will need to walk it out at that particular point. And, you know, there are many opportunities when we're faced with obstacles, but so many times that obstacle, we just focus on that so much about the can't, that we forget to look for, well, what can we do? And so we've seen some of our peers in the business really have went out here and reinvented themselves, and it's been really beautiful and magical and special. And I like to hold on to those, you know, people that are doing just that, because I think that it's inspiring. And, you know, it just shows you how resilient that you can be, and that, you know, everything that you see before you isn't necessarily everything that you're meant to have.
No, that's very true. And like the quote from The Wire goes, the game is the game. And it's going to keep going no matter what. So a lot of people, I think, they get married to the game and they get shocked when it leaves them, you know,
oh yeah, the game has no loyalty. It'll cheat on you. It just has no loyalty. Yeah, no loyalty.
There's no loyalty to the game right now. People got to look out for themselves. I know people think, well, they can't survive without me. They think they're David Ruffin on The Temptations, you know.
Look, I'll be honest.
Without me.
I have confidence in my expertise in the game. I've earned that through, you know, careers and stations and all of that. But I harbor no illusions. You know, I'm blessed every day that I get to do it. But I also understand that I serve at the pleasure of the president. And whenever the rules change and the game changes, you know, we're here or not here, depending on the circumstances. So, you know, there's an old adage, you know, especially as a programmer. And it's the funny joke of, you know, you got record company people blowing up your phone every waking moment, right? It's the label, they want airplay, blah, blah, blah. And your phone is just going nuts. Well, yeah, be laid off tomorrow. So the first 2 days is everybody trying to get the story. And I mean, industry wide, everybody's going to call you. What happened? They want the dish. You know, is there something scandalous that they could talk about? And then like after 2 or 3 days, like, whoop, it's zero. And because whoever takes your seat in that particular company or position, well, they're the new flavor of the week, flavor of the month, flavor of the year. And so now the attention gets diverted. And so you have to know who you are as a person. You have to have a sense of self, because things like that can really rock you if you really attach your self-worth to this business. You know, we were living in the land of likes and all of that before social media was even here, because our existence as air personalities, especially air personalities, you know, is dependent on the opinion of others, right? So that's always been the game for us. And now it's like all over the place, all of the social media and becoming an influencer and the things of that nature. So, you know, our entire existence completely depends on the opinion of others. And if you don't have a real sense of self, whoo-wee, that can be truly devastating when the business either sets you down, sets you to the side, changes your role, you know, whatever. I mean, you might be somebody who's on the air and then they say, well, you know what, Ryan, you'd be better served being in the production department. So you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm on the air every day. I'm trying to talk to the people. I've got something to say, blah, 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 blah. But the company makes a different decision. Now, truthfully, you may be the most amazing production director and maybe you have a gift you haven't even realized yet. But I know initially the shock of that, you know, can be really devastating if you don't have a good sense of self.
Okay, so what would be your advice to somebody that's in the game and you know, they don't want to be left out like that. They want to stay in as long as possible, because my first thought is make sure you try to master as much as you can, so they, you know, it make a hard decision to let you go. But
okay, yeah. Well,
that?
Figgy, I would say that's absolutely right. Number one. There's a guy on my team. You guys probably are familiar with Funky Larry Jones. I'm not going to throw his age in atmosphere, but let me just say he's, you know, nominated for Texas Radio Hall of Fame. He's coming up on 50 years in the game. I mean, that's a career, right? Like the rest of us are just a drop in the bucket, comparatively speaking. So, you know, one thing that I'll say about Larry is that, you know, we'll have a meeting, a conversation or whatever. He's in office with a pen and a pad. He's writing things down. Like he's open-minded. I'm not saying that everything is easy for him to learn. You know, there takes some repetition, practice, and maybe some just special, you know, attention to work with someone who's unfamiliar with some areas. But the willingness to do it is absolutely there. So you're right, Figgy. You've got to really look at how the game has changed and what skill sets are required. You know, not to age myself, but when I started in the game, all you really needed was headphones. Now you need headphones and a laptop. Now you need headphones, a laptop, and you need like 50 million social media platforms. You need to know how to edit video. You need to know how to blah, 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 right? So the game is different. So having an attitude of gratitude and then getting in there and mastering the current skill sets required to excel and exceed your job responsibilities. All right. The other way that you make sure that you have longevity in this business, and I always tell people they get it wrong. They think it's ratings. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that ratings don't matter. They do, but most talent overlook the most important thing, and that is your relationship with clients, your ability to move the crowd for paying customers of the radio station. And that's the endorsement game. Are you someone who can move the crowd for clients? Can you help the clients that advertise with the station grow their business? And by what percentage? You know, so it's really working with the sales team, cultivating endorsements, and helping those clients that are making the investment in you increase their business. I mean, and that's the bottom line. The bottom line is the bottom line ultimately for everybody. So you may be the ratings can get sketchy, right? We all know that, depending on where the meters fall and blah, 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 right? So, you know, all of us, all of our stations, all of us have personalities. We've all fallen on a streak of the ratings aren't so great. But if you're a talent who's got incredible relationships and has done and continues to do an incredible job for clients, helping clients, paying clients grow their business so that they're willing to invest in you and they don't care about the ratings, that's where the real value comes in. A lot of times people call me up and say, TT, I haven't had a raise and whatever, and my PD won't listen to me and I'm number one and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, how much business you got on the books? And then you get the kind of quiet phone call and silence. And they're like, well, what do you mean? How much business? Well, how many endorsements do you have? Well, then we have to really peel back what the endorsements are. So I'm gonna really break down the game. So clients will come to a radio station and initially they're just buying the day part. So let's say, for example, there's a client, maybe it's a hair product. Jasmine's doing middays. I want to buy middays on your station. Is there a woman on the station? And so you're a nameless person. You're a day part at that point. Your responsibility as a talent is to turn that opportunity into a relationship, and to be interested and vested in helping that client move business, whether it's national or whether it's local. And a lot of times as personalities, we think that's the salesperson's job. But please believe we are all in the sales business, every single person, from programming to production to sales to the promotions person to the person that sits at the front desk. We are all in the sales business. So if you have the ability and the desire to move the crowd and to build real relationships with clients, that's going to be equity and stock that you're building up in your career. And especially when you start to get big brands. One of the best people in the game that I've ever met that does a phenomenal job with endorsements is G-Man. G-Man does afternoons at 97.9 The Box. He is one of the best pitchmen I've ever met in my life. He overstands it. He goes the extra mile for clients. He goes the extra mile with his creativity. He is intentional about developing relationships. There's been this one car guy who must have worked at every car dealership in the marketplace. And every time he leaves and goes somewhere else, he brings that business back to the radio station and back to G-Man. This guy has equity and he has value. So if you want to have longevity in the game, make sure that you master all of the current skill sets needed to be successful, and make sure that you can move the crowd for paying customers.
That's so interesting, because I always thought of that, because we've seen it, firsthand of shows being, a pretty good show as far as ratings, but they blow up the show for the simple fact that, these clients might not want to spend money with that show, for the simple fact that, they're not really, I guess, I don't want to say relatable, but they might not want to spend as much with them. And so we all think like, dang, that show was the #1 show in the city. Why they just blow it up like that? And it's like the salespeople not really making money from it.
I mean, that's a large reason. If you're a show or a personality, like I can only imagine what Rod Ryan's paycheck looks like over at the Buzz, right? I mean, this guy, he's another person who has a reputation for being phenomenal with clients, phenomenal with how he can move the crowd with endorsements, and great connection with listeners and great connection to help grow business. And so people become invested in Rod Ryan. They're in the Rod Ryan business, which makes them in the Buzz business. And as a personality, I always tell people, know your business. Like if you're a sales manager, you would want your salesperson to know their business, where your clients stand, how much money are they investing, where's your opportunity to grow that investment. I always tell the same thing to personalities. You have to know your business. How many endorsements do you have? Are they spending greater or less year over year? Or whatever you're doing for them, are you seeking feedback so that you can do it better? Know your business. Is there the opportunity to bring additional business to the company? Because if you're someone who's a power player in that way, you really do build more longevity. And a company is much more willing to stick with somebody who's not getting phenomenal ratings, but getting phenomenal business. So, there's a lot of examples of that throughout my career, even before PPM became a factor. Even though I'm from Boston originally, I came up through small markets where everything was a grind. Every dollar you were scrapping it out. And in a day and time where, I might have been the midday person, but I also wrote the promos like you were talking about, Figgy, learning how to do that. I was running the board and whatever shift needed for somebody else who had a remote. There was no promotions department, Jasmine, none. So I was driving the van. And at that time, we had the big supersized speakers that we had to put up on the speaker stands, and I had to hulk that thing out, and I'm 5'2", so you can only imagine. So, I come from, humble beginnings and an era where you had to do everything. And so you really learn how to connect with people. You learn how to provide value to an organization. It was being an influencer before there was influence, but also understanding, as a team, it's great to do the sexy job of cracking a mic, but it's also equally important what you can do behind the scenes to make the whole team work. And that's really what teamwork is about.
That's very true. Very true. And you mentioned a little bit of the early days and how you came up. And I want to go back there because I'm interested in the early days back when radio was a magical place for all of us before we grew jaded and cynical in the industry. We still really, it was a magical place for us all. So you mentioned you came from Boston.
Yeah.
How did you get your start in radio? What made you decide this is what you wanted to do? Mm-hmm. And how did you make your way eventually from Boston all the way down to Houston? Because I'm sure that was quite the culture shift.
It was. Let me give you the Cliff Notes. So as a child, I grew up with humble beginnings like a lot of us, right? So I had a radio and I had a library card. So there wasn't, in our house, there's not TVs in every room that wasn't open access. You couldn't just go watch TV, right? So, it was up to us to find other pursuits. And so for me, it was reading, and it was also listening to the radio because that was free music. And I always felt connected to music. Music is medicine. I always say that to people. It can accentuate your mood. It can make you feel better. It's so many things to people that love it. So, I was a consumer of radio. And I was the girl that was sitting there with a cassette tape recording the countdown at the end of the year. I mean, I was just fascinated by it, and I could get it for free. I didn't have money to go to the record store and buy records, but I could always get free music. And those personalities that I grew up listening to, oddly enough, some are still on the air. So I think Maddie in the Morning was nominated for the National Radio Hall of Fame. He's the morning guy at Kiss 108 in Boston. So, some of those people are still on the radio, but, they became what the beautiful thing about radio is they're your friend. They really made radio be a person. And so the way that they shared culture and music and all of that. So I was very connected there. And in my hometown, we had a small community station located in my high school. And I was able to join and become a part of that team. The general manager challenged me to get my FCC third class license. And so I had to study a book that was the phone book, right? And I took the test. He said, if I took the test, he would give me a shift after school if I passed it. And so I by some miracle, passed it on the first go, brought him my card. He was holding it up to the light like, is this real? This little girl in here telling me she passed the test. But I presented my license, which I still have, and he made good on his promise. And a year later, I got my first job offer from a small station in the outside of Boston. But, that was when the light came, went off that maybe this could be a career for me. And the person that had approached me was shocked to find out I was only 15 years old. So, I shifted my focus and, did all the things that you do in high school, go interview somebody who's doing the job you want to do and all that, and just followed the recommendations. I interviewed the music director at Kiss 108. I couldn't get to the PD, who was a legend, Sonny Joe White, but I got his music director. She told me to go to Emerson College. I applied to a gazillion schools, but she said, that's where to go. That's where I went. And they had the best college radio station in the country because it was executed by students. There was a faculty member who was the general manager, but everyone else was a student. And you had to go out for it like a job interview. It was that serious. And you had to go out for it every 6 months. It was that serious. And so I was immediately put into this highly competitive atmosphere. And the music was what we would call block format. So it was a variety of music. It started the day with folk music. Then it was, contemporary jazz. Then it was traditional jazz, reggae music, alternative music, urban music, and then on the weekend was a hodgepodge of everything. And so I was thoroughly dedicated. I was on the air. I got on the second half of my freshman year, which made everybody mad because I was a freshman, but gratefully they saw something in me. So I was able to secure a shift, and I was able to earn my shift back every 6 months. And when I graduated, one of the alumni from the college had become a program director in Columbus, Georgia. He's what I would say is a triple OG. And so Philip David March became interested in giving back. So he reached back out to the college station, and some of us sent our stuff. He liked my stuff better, and he became a mentor. And so after I graduated a couple months later, I went to Columbus, Georgia. I worked for $5 an hour. And about 3 or 4 months in, they gave me a full-time job for $11,800 to do middays. And the only question I asked my boss was, did I have health insurance? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I'll figure it out. And so that's where it started. And so I worked there, and then I went to Tallahassee, Florida, and Cincinnati, Ohio, and then ended up in Houston. And since I've been in Houston, I've also worked with Radio 1, Houston, Indianapolis, and then Houston and Charlotte. So I've done multiple market scenarios. So that's sort of the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah.
Yeah, the old-fashioned way.
Resume. I'm jealous.
Oh man. Well, it's the old-fashioned way, right? So it's go where the opportunity. And the other thing too, I would say, is that I was willing to do what was necessary to live my dream. So who can live on $11,800? It doesn't matter what year it was. Nobody can live on that. So I worked at Walmart, in the evening, and then eventually I got a job working for the Columbus Ledger-Inquirer newspaper. And I would do my radio job, which includes all the things that you still had to do, cut commercials and all the extras, right? I would do my radio job. I'd go work my second job. And then if I wasn't done at my radio job with the extra stuff, I would go back and do that. And so the entire time I was in Columbus, Georgia, which was 7 years, I worked 2 jobs the entire time. And then my next market, I worked extra, but it was more of like the extra side hustle, picking up projects rather than, working for a company, but I had to work, So I always tell people, what are you willing to do to live the life that you want? Oftentimes when people come to me for an interview, and I'm going to give you one of TT's, don't ever do this. So please don't sit in my office and have me ask you about what are you doing to feed yourself right now. And you sit here and say, well, look, I'm working at Target. And then you completely dog out Target. When the reality is Target is the job that just put gas in your car. Target is the job that's helping you pay your cell phone bill to call around to even get a job. So what's your attitude about the other job that you need to do, that other investment that you need to make? I always look at things like that because I think it says a lot about the character of people. And oftentimes people want to get to the fame, but they don't want to put in the effort to get there. And there is no shortcut to fame. I think we've all seen examples for people that have taken the shortcut and it's blown up in their face. Oftentimes the real claim to fame is a methodical, sacrificial path, which is intentional, because during the time where you're making the sacrifices, you are honing yourself, you're honing the craft. Iron sharpens iron. But if you're never willing to put yourself in front of the iron, man, oh man, you may get famous, but the first hurricane that comes down, you're going to blow out and be out to sea. So, those times are difficult, but those are the character building experiences. And it helped me be so resilient as a program director. When I finally got to Houston, I hit the lotto, like in the industry sense of the word, major brand, major station. And they had a budget for promotions. I was shocked, right? But when those budgets started to decrease and when those extras, because the industry started to change, went away, I was able to tap into my history, my upbringing, my path in the game to know that, I'm great at making something out of nothing. And so that allowed me to be resilient because I already had the foundation. So many people want to shortchange the road to success. And I think that's a huge mistake. There are no shortcuts. Take the detour if it's sending you that way, because everything that's taking you off the path is intentional. God is trying to put tools in your toolbox, but we don't want to pay attention to the path. We just want what we want when we want it, how we want it. But I always tell people, you're missing the boat if you just don't go down the path, because the things that you need are found on the path. They're not found on the shortcut.
Oh man, she is fitting.
I mean, honestly, that's 100%, because I know Figgy, because we're both sports radio producers, and we both have friends who always come up to us and say, man, you have the coolest job. I want to do your job. Man, it's my dream to work in sports radio. People call the show asking, like, how do I get a job there? And we already know, like, depending on your energy, we already know, like, okay, you really not feel for this. You think you're going to be making money here? Like, you're not. For a long time. You really have to love doing radio to make a career, because it's a lot of sacrifice. I don't work the second job. Figgy don't work the second job. Like, we've definitely been in the grind, and we're still in the grind, to be honest. So that's tough.
The advantage that you have now, like if I had the tools that are available now when I started, man, it just would be so incredible, right? You have awesome tools. So for you, Ryan, and Figgy and Jasmine, whatever it is that you see for your future, you have so many tools at your disposal now that you don't have to wait for a company to give you permission to be great, right? So I would say use your, everything that you can gain, all the experience, connections, and doing a great job, you should do all of that. But because we have social media, you and I can sit here right now and you can develop your brand in a whole different way, in a whole different aspect. And so that's the fascinating thing to me about the business now, is that to me, I see nothing but opportunity. And I also see opportunity in a very different way. So one of my pet peeves is, and Jasmine, this is going to be for the ladies. One of my pet peeves in the business is every time I interview a female for a potential job opportunity, she's so-and-so with the T, or the air check is about the tea, the gossip, right? And so that, as a woman in the business, it disappoints me, because I want to tell women that you should never be reduced just to the gossip girl. Like, you have so much more to offer, and that this is a world where you can exceed and excel by falling into whatever your niche is. So you may have an interest. There was a woman that I was coaching who got set down by the business. And so there's an exercise, and I won't bore you with it, but there's an exercise I do with people I'm coaching to figure out what their niche could possibly be. And so she's a thrifter. She is Miss Thrift Market, right? She's a thrifter. She knows how to get great deals and steals and make this work in the very thrifting world. First things first, she's, African-American, so young woman of color, and she was young too, right? So young woman of color, thrifting. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, who's the expert in thrifting, this age group, who is also a young woman of color? Couldn't come up with the person. I said, honey, you are sitting on $1 million brand. If you'll sit down here, we can strategize it out, and you can build a $1 million brand here, because you have the leverage of social media, and it's about engagement, and it's about creating a product that will attract people and building the engagement with the people that are interested in what you have to offer. Has nothing to do with Terry with the T. It has everything to do with this thing that you are really an expert in. You're an expert in thrifting, and you have all of these amazing skills that you've developed in radio. So now you can use those influencer abilities to build this entire other brand. Sure, if radio comes calling, I'm not saying don't take it, but I also would say to people, don't sit here and wait for that. Like, if you have a great interest and you could really flesh it out and develop a brand, like, why not do that? Own your piece of the rock. Own it. Nobody can take away what you know. Nobody can take away really what you own. Like, all of that brain power and influence, if you do the right thing and build it, they will come.
I think the problem and the reason why it doesn't come easy to some people is because I think people have their idols in radio or otherwise, and they just want to be that. Like, for example, when Howard Stern was like the biggest radio personality, there were so many wannabe Howard Stern people. Yeah. Now it's like wannabe Charlemagne the God people. Like, everybody sees that person and they say, I want to be that. When it's, you got to realize nobody wants the knockoff version of something. Nothing's more important than being yourself and being authentic and bringing what you personally bring to the table.
That's so true. And, I had the pleasure of working with Mad Hatter for, a number of years, right? Legend in the game. And so he would get approached all the time by people, they're trying to speed past Mad Hatter, and it's like, well, you haven't done anything of the things necessary to be a Mad Hatter, right? Just like for Charlemagne, Charlemagne, you're seeing what you see now, but you're not seeing the sacrifice that this man made, right? You're not seeing the sacrifice that Hatter made. You're not seeing the sacrifices that Howard Stern made. You're not seeing any of that. You're seeing the end result, and you think that you're better than that. You think that you're better. That kills me. I'm better than that. I'm like, get out of my face with that. How are you better? Who are you to judge that? You're not in a position to judge that. It's not your job. It's not your role. It's not your responsibility. Who are you? And what is it about you that's authentically you that can be great? Take what's already you and make that great. Then sit down and have a conversation with me about how you're better than somebody. That really irritates the crap out of me, because there's a lot of things that go into what you may hear in a 30-second break, or what you might see in a 1-minute clip. You're not seeing everything that goes into that. And so, that tends to just drive me crazy, because I'm like, your eyes are on the wrong prize. And I agree with you. You either want Nike, you want Adidas, you want Converse. Beyond that, I don't know what to tell you, right? Are you the 50th brand in the marketplace, or are you going to go out here and create something that's unique?
Yeah, I kind of get that from a lot of people too, because they see my position and say, wow, you're full time. That's what I want to do. But they don't see the parts of me being with CBS Radio since 2012 on the street team up until like 2017, where I worked at CBS Radio in Cleveland, and I couldn't get up in programming for some reason. But I stayed employed. I kept going. I moved here, and I ended up getting my way up here. So it took years. Top of me working holidays and filming in last minute, doing overnights and early mornings and late nights. People don't see all that. So once they get in the door, and they're kind of upset that they can't work the midday show, or they can't work the night show because they have a birthday party to go to, and they just too busy, and they get upset when they get passed up. This is like, man, you got to put in more work. You kind of got to set your schedule, aside, and get this part time, because I was working at Starbucks kind of recently, like a year ago.
Well, it's value, right, Figgy? You're providing value. It's the value equation. It's like, well, what type of value, if you're going to work for a company, okay, if the goal is I want to work for said company, I want to work for said station, it's how does Figgy, Jasmine, Ryan, how are you providing value? It's a value proposition. And a lot of times people don't approach it like that. It's like, what can you do for me? And, like when President Kennedy said it so many years ago, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It's the same principle. Like, these are not new principles, but we've lost sight of some of that because, I hate to say it, I'm gonna tell you, reality television has been like the worst thing to happen to humanity, because it's a fake reality, and it's allowing people to get famous like on a shortcut. And so, and you don't see everything that goes into this picture that's being painted, and people are buying into that, right? So, this fake reality out here. And so you're not really understanding what it really takes to have longevity, what it really takes to be famous, or whatever it is that you're seeking. So, it's a value proposition. If you want to work for a company, it's a value proposition. If you want to work for yourself, the value proposition is still there, but it becomes the Trump part of that is going to be, what value do you provide for people that want to consume your product or your brand? It's both of those things in radio, but it's definitely the company first. It's also the listeners, but for yourself, it's, what value you're providing for the people that you hope to consume, that will consume your product.
So I personally am still growing and finding my niche, and I'm going to get with you and see if I can't grab that exercise after this interview. But what do you ever find yourself feeling like, I don't know the terminology, like an old head? Everything you said, I agree with, but also sometimes I waver and feel like, well, maybe I'm not with the times. Maybe I'm just caught in feeling like my mom almost. Maybe I'm feeling like, I'm not adapting to what the culture is providing now versus being set in how I feel and my morals and my character, and not liking popcorn artists and not liking popcorn stardom and fame, but also recognizing that that's what's going on right now. How do you ever find yourself struggling with, I guess, not wanting to seem caught up in your ways, but then also adapting?
Well, I mean, I think I'm very adaptable. I think it's one of it's one of my strengths in general. But I think the real question of what you're asking is, like, faced with things that you don't necessarily always believe in, right? So, that can be a struggle. I mean, I think music in general is in a terrible state right now. I think it's awful. Hip hop is in a bad way. R&B is not in a great way. Pop is not in a great way. I think country is sort of holding its own. Rock is trying to, sort of bring it together. So I think music in general is pretty stale right now. That's not to say I don't think it can, get out of that, but I think we're in a pretty stale place. Creatively, even in movies, right? We're in a pretty stale place. Like, we're going and we're remaking every possible movie that's been made. And so I sit here and wonder sometimes, does nobody have an original thought or another story to tell? So, I think creatively that we're in a pretty stale place. I think, Jasmine, you can never go wrong by being true to who you are. I think that, when you're faced with something that's resonating with you in not a great way, I always say step back from that and figure out exactly what is it about that thing that's not resonating with you well, so you can really get clarity in the moment. You know, what is that thing that's really bothering you? Is it that you're feeling like, why are you feeling not with the times? Is it because somebody's trying to make you feel that you're not with the times? Are you subscribing to somebody else's opinion of that because quietly they're trying to oust you anyway because they want to be where you are? So you have to sort of assess, you know, where that's coming from. And the other thing that I'll tell you is that nobody can ever take away what you know. So you may not always agree with, you know, a particular song or particular this. I've taken stands, you know, and made choices on records I thought were just too over the line. I have a reputation for cleaning up the clean version in the business. You know, but I also work for a company, and I know there's a certain level of responsibility that comes with that as part of the job. I may not always agree with every record, but you also have to do your job. And so for me, I try to find ways in my sphere of influence as a program director to try to balance the scales. One of the guys you may or may not know, Figgy, you may know Russ Parr, a name Russ Parr. So
Sure.
Russ is a legendary Texas guy originally, but he's a legendary air personality, right? He was on in Cleve, syndicated guy. So Russ Parr, you know, did mornings on like a hip hop station. Now he's on an adult station, but for many years. And so some of he was a comedian. And so some of his stuff was super edgy. And I remember we took him to a school and he was phenomenal with the students. I mean, they were just hanging on every word. And the principal pulled him aside after and said, "Oh my God," she said, "I can't believe you're this amazing guy. I had reservations about you coming to my school. How can you do that on the radio and be so phenomenal in person?" And Russ said, "Hey, sometimes I do what I need to do so that I can get everybody's attention so I can give them the message they really need to have." So I think for me also in my career, there's some of that as well, is like figuring out, well, how can I get the biggest audience and then be able to feed information or be able to provide insight into the information that they really need to have. Because a lot of times they could be seeking whatever they're seeking at that moment, but there's nothing that goes with it. It's like somebody who wants to eat dessert all the time, right? So what we do is dessert, right? I'm eating cake, I'm eating pie, candy, whatever. But a smart program director, a smart talent will also find a way to put some meat and vegetables with that dessert. And so, you know, really that's what I try to do. You know, I am okay with who I am as a person. I'm not perfect, so I want to come off in an arrogant way, but I'm okay with who I am as a person. So I have conviction in my opinions. I have conviction in who I am, and I'm not disrespectful of others and others' opinion, but I'm also not afraid to stand true to mine, even if it's unpopular, because that's part of who I am. And so I think that's what builds your reputation, and that's what builds your respect, is your, you know, just being true to who you are. And I think that as long as you're true to who you are as a person, I think that the rest of it, you know, ultimately, hon, you know, it doesn't matter. It's the Joel Osteen rule. 25% of the people out there are going to love you. 25% of the people are going to hate you. There's 50% in the middle. 25% don't like you today, but they could like you tomorrow. And then the reverse is true. So, you know, worry about the 25% of the people who love you. Do the best you can by everybody else. And, you know, just stay true to who you are as a person. Just try to do the best you can by people. And then know when to apologize. None of us are perfect. So if you screw up and make a mistake, you know, be woman enough or man enough to say, "I'm sorry," and do what you need to do to make up for that.
So you mentioned about the records and I guess cleaning them up and possibly taking some off, which is like, oh, this is too edgy, I'm gonna pull that song off. Have you? Now, it's kind of different in the whole social media era where we had certain artists that say certain things and certain radio stations just pull their music because of their comments. Have you, how do you feel about that? Because I think it was
R. Kelly.
R. Kelly.
You want to put it out there.
Or even, I was actually thinking about Kanye, because this is back when Kanye made some bad comments. Yeah. And I think a station in Alabama just banned his music. So have you ever been close to something like that? Or what's the mindset of a program director when something like that happens, some type of big outrage?
I mean, you have to take the pulse of your people, you know, the pulse of your listeners. I mean, you know, if somebody, you know, there's plenty of artists that are controversial with that, right? You know, I think it's a careful case. I'm going to tell you one of the best things that Philip David March ever told me: what you don't play will never hurt you. Period. There are 35,000 new singles that drop every week. 35,000. Not going to play them all. So what you don't play will never hurt you. It's really much more about what you will play. And I think people get the game really confused. The playlist is small. I don't play everything. One, I can't. It's a numbers game. Radio is a numbers game. Your rotation, your playlist is a numbers game. You can never play everything. It's not logical and not possible. You hope to come up with a collection of songs that are going to attract the target demo so that they will listen longer, the TSL game, and that's the game. But you don't play everything. I've had records that I just missed the boat on, and I'm not saying in a bad way, just didn't play them. Didn't mean that playlist wasn't great. Didn't mean I didn't have #1 ratings, but everything doesn't always make it. It's a numbers game. So what you don't play will never hurt you, period. And that's the best way that I can answer it. Okay. What you don't play will never hurt you. Because especially in this day and age, if I'm not playing something you want, Figgy, you're going to go over to Spotify. You're going to pull it up on YouTube. You're going to go to Apple Music. You're not worried about whether one of my stations is playing your favorite song, because you have access to your favorite song when you want it, how you want it. The game now is the music recipe is definitely the backdrop, but it's also about those personalities that can engage the crowd in between the records. You guys know that. You're in talk radio. If your personalities suck, you're in trouble. So it's a lot more about back to what it's supposed to be. The personalities, definitely stepping into the forefront. Radio, the ability to develop original content and see where that world can take you. But radio music is important to a music format, but it's really not everything, because people can get music wherever they want to, when they want to, how they want to.
Okay, and I'm glad you're being very honest and open. I like that these are not political answers you're giving us, because I get the vibe that you're going to keep it real. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad, because I want to ask some real questions, some questions that people probably want to know, some of the deep, dark secrets of the radio game, maybe. I want to know straight up, people have been talking about this. I know Iggy Azalea made some comments a little while back. Does payola still exist in the radio industry currently?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't do it. I've never done it. My reputation is pristine when it comes to that. But yeah, payola has been part of the music game since the music game started. Yeah. It might wear a different dress, but payola is this. Payola is, Ryan, you're DJing at the club. You're the DJ. Tootsie Fruity artist comes up to you, slips you a $20 bill and says, slide my record on. You just had payola. It does happen. It does.
So is payola more with the, I guess I kind of know this, but is it more with the record companies, the bigger record companies? Because we notice, I'm sure everybody noticed some of the same songs being played over and over.
No, you're misunderstanding. Now, radio is a repetitive game. Like a top station, their P1 listener probably listens, I'll give you an arbitrary figure, like 90 minutes a week. So radio is strategically repetitive. It's the design for success. Play a group of the masses' favorite songs and play them with a certain repetition. So when they decide to check into your station, they hear something they like. That's not payola, my friend. That's just programming. So payola is like, the record that is nobody is playing, that's, like whatever. It's or even, like I said, in a club or in a whatever, it's somebody greasing the wheel to get some access. And I always tell artists, please don't go down the road. I always warn them, because when that check stops, your airplay stops. Everybody doesn't have the big hit record. If you could build, and you have all the tools necessary to build your fan base authentically, if you're going to spend money on something, spend money on a business consultant who can, for the music business, who can help you establish and grow your brand. Don't pay off somebody just to get a few spins. That's not going to be authentic airplay. And so it has nothing to do with the repetition of songs. Most companies, large and small, have access to research. And so those records you hear, you might be tired of it, Figgy, but that record is probably in there for a good reason. It has nothing to do with payola. It has to do with people just aren't tired of hearing their favorite song yet, even though you might be.
So to set the record straight, record labels are not paying radio stations to play the songs over and over. It's more of a programming strategy.
People are playing songs over and over because that's how the radio business works. That's how the current, I don't know many radio stations that are successful playing a bunch of random music that nobody knows. I just don't. People come to radio for the most part to hear their favorite songs. When you're out here and you're hitting up your Spotify, or you're just running down the streets of YouTube, you're doing, you're there for a different reason. But radio, they are looking to hear their favorite song. Nobody's tuning into Magic 102.1. Their first reason is to hear some random record. They want to hear their favorite record. Where's Frankie? Where's some Jodeci? Where's some H-Town? They're coming for that. Same with the box. I mean, Box is fairly aggressive with breaking new music, but those new songs are carefully wrapped with hit records, because at the end of the day, it is about playing the hits. But playing the hits is the name of the game in radio. So no, it's because that's how the business works. That's how the industry works. And somebody can sit here and gripe about you playing their favorite song, but they're still sitting here listening to it because it's still the song they want to hear. So, some of those things are just a byproduct of the industry and byproduct of the business. But no, that has nothing to do with payola. Payola is some guy or lady who wants access to something they haven't yet earned. That's payola, my friend.
Okay, that's interesting. I think people hear certain records being played, and if they don't like it, they think it's conspiracy. If it keeps, for me, for example, I will admit I like Beyonce, but her version of "Before I Let You Go," I was like, wait a minute, I just wasn't a huge fan of it, but it got played all the time, and I'm like, man, give me the original, please. Bring that.
And that's, you can't please everyone. You hope to you have a target demo, and you hope to create a product that's going to, for the most part, please the bulk of the target demo, for the greatest length of time. Okay. So, thank you, baby. So, there are records that may not resonate with you, but if the majority of people that consume the product, that record is resonating with them, as a programmer, nothing is ever 100%. When I get call out, or I get my research, or I do my research, it's never 100% of the people say this is their favorite song. That's very rare. You're dealing with majorities, you're dealing with percentages. And so, I feel you. There's songs I get tired of too, or songs that I don't personally like that I end up playing because I know I'm programming for a clientele who is looking for and has an expectation. There have been great records that didn't make the cut. There's been crappy records that end up as hits. There's been records that I thought was great that are put in and ended up being great, right? Redbone would be a great example from Childish Gambino. One of the stations to break that, programmers to break that record, not in one, but two formats. So I heard the record, and then I also watched his movement. And when he went on that show, it was one of the award shows, and he, had that influence to make the Migos record go to another stratosphere. I said, this guy is, Donald Glover deserves a shot on hip hop. And so I put Redbone on the box. Now you would think the box, you think hip hop, but it was one of those strategic plays that I just had a feeling. This is where the art meets the science. I had a feeling about a record. My research was who he is as a person, his sphere of influence, what the music sounded like, and I went for it. And the record ended up being a power on both of my stations. So the same way that I took Tank, who was, had a huge successful record on the Magic side of things, but something said, I wonder what happens if I test this on the box for the box audience. And it resonated. Or like I love the Skip Marley Her record, and I couldn't wait to put that record on the box. I thought that was going to be a huge record for 97.9, and it didn't resonate. But I tested it for the Magic audience, and it was huge. I moved the record over. So most 99, unless you're just a lone mom and pop station out here, all of these radio stations do research. It's science, it's gut. That's the art part of it. A good programmer is going to have a healthy dose of both. But everything that's on there, for the most part, is researched. It's the random record that you see only in the overnights. Those are the payola-ish. Or people that, again, if the best way for me to sum up payola is it's people paying for something they have not yet earned the right to have.
I get you.
Okay, that kind of makes sense, because on our side, we get people saying, because we're the home of the Texans. So people say, all y'all do is talk about the same old thing, Texans, but
they're listening.
Yeah, and honestly, if you look at the numbers, it's working because the numbers are up. Whenever we talk about this, we was talking about the Sean Watson situation. Nobody here wanted to talk about that or like that, but the numbers was through the roof, and we had to stay on it. So I know you get the couple people that say I'm tired of it, and I told them I agree, I'm tired of it too. But that was like the big story, so we had to roll with the hot hand.
You really do, and you're never going to please everyone. You're never going to please everyone. You know, you just hope that on any given day you're pleasing your core to the best of your ability, but you're never going to please everybody. You know, you just want to do the best you can, make an honest effort every day.
Speaking of the Texans, though, you have come from Boston. You've been all over. What sports teams do you root for?
Well, I will never not root for my home team.
Okay.
But no, I'm a person that, look, I've moved and been in other markets in my career. I'm old school. Now this is where I am old school. Like I support the home team because that's what I grew up with. But the flip side of that is wherever I am is home. Like Houston is home for me. At this point, I'm going on 17 years here. This is home. So I'm going to root for the home team. Here, let me have that hat, baby. See, my baby's over here handing me this. My husband just got me one of these, you know, Astros fedoras, right? So no, you know, this is me. I believe you support the home team. You know, I always say I'm Boston bred, Houston fed. So I'm gonna support what feeds me. Go Texans, go Astros, go Dynamo, go Rockets. You know, I'm here for all of it.
Gotcha. That's good
I feel
to know.
You 100%. I feel you 100%. Now, we know you're a very busy lady. We don't want to keep you too long. But I have one more question. We can circle back to Figgy and Jasmine and kind of wrap it up there. I have one more real question, though, for you. I want to know, because people, one thing I mentioned earlier is that when people we meet and they find out we work in radio, they say, first off, you know, I want to work there. Or they say, oh, you work in radio? I mean, isn't that going to die soon? A lot of people seem to think that radio has been dying out. I've been hearing this ever since my early 20s now. People think radio basically has no future. It's going to the way of these streaming music platforms and podcasts and whatnot. They swear that's the future. Now, I don't want the political answer because we get that in our corporate meetings all the time.
I'm not political.
I want the real Terri Thomas answer about the future of radio. Where do you think the format is going? Do you think it has a future? And what is its status like currently?
Radio is dead as we know it. And it's radio to me is like the Phoenix. Okay. So when, you know, we all know what the Phoenix is. So, you know, we're in a very Phoenix kind of mode right now where everything is being burnt to the crisp and it's in a process of reinvention. And I think it's in a process of coming full circle. When radio first started, this is, you know, and I was not around for this, just making sure you all know that. But when radio first started, you know, it was everybody sitting around the radio. And it was basically television on the radio, right? It was shows. It was, you know, sports games. You know, you could hear the baseball game. It was, you know, dramas on the radio and all this, that, and the third. And so that's what radio was about. And then here comes TV and radio shifts, blah, blah, blah. So we are headed to back where we came from, which is content. This is about the ability to create content. And I'll say this to anyone. Radio as we know it may be evolving, but I don't think radio is going to go away because ultimately radio is a content delivery platform and it's free. So it's about people's approach to the platform that I think is in the middle of an evolution. And I think for those that know how to develop great content, are willing to take risks, I think they're going to be the trendsetters for where the industry is headed. And if you look at radio, like your company has rebranded Odyssey, right? So that's a rebranding intentional for very good reasons. We won't go into that. You know, I know, we know that's a business decision. So, but all of these major companies also have been spending money in developing digital platforms. There's streaming, there's this, there's that, and the other, right? So, you know, radio is a content delivery platform. Radio companies also have developed other platforms in which to distribute content. So it's going to come back to what it was initially. It's a content game. Are you creating great content? And how are you repurposing that content across How are you repurposing that content across your distribution platforms? I mean, that's really the name of the game. And so I think radio is in the middle of a evolution.
Okay.
And if you're not someone who's willing to make the sacrifices necessary to fall on your face and create what's next, then you're not going to be a part of it. But if you're willing to make an ass out of yourself, to risk humiliation and failure for the greater good, I think you got a shot.
All right, so I gotta ask this. So I was very surprised when you guys started that pop station. That was it Radio Now?
Mm-hmm.
When y'all started that, I was very shocked for the simple fact that I don't even remember Radio 1 having a pop station. Because
but you do.
Huh? Yeah, I know. Yeah. So do y'all ever see yourself dipping into the sports part or possibly having a
we are.
I knew it because I always try to guess what other stations might do, because I feel like it's a big audience for Black sports hosts, because working in this field, it's not a lot of Black sports hosts or people like us in the game. They usually go for the typical white guy, the nerdy white guy talk sports.
Figgy, I'm going to help you out right now. Okay. First of all, we have a very successful pop station in Indianapolis, Radio Now. So, and then y'all got out of the pop business. You left a format on the table. So we thought we'd jump in and see what we could do. So, but that's a long and winding road.
Yeah.
Figgy, do you love sports? Are you an expert in sports? Are you passionate about sports? Yes. So don't wait for someone to give you permission to be that. You're sitting here with Ryan. You guys both work at the sports station. You're doing this, which is cool, but you're obviously passionate about sports. Just come up with your hook, man. It's marketing and branding. What's going to be unique about what you're presenting? What's going to be unique about your hook? And then build that. Build your following. People buy into people before they buy into products. You and Ryan get together, figure out, like, look, if we're going to do sports, how are we going to do differently than anyone else? And you two could be the premier guys. This is about you using your creativity to make a thing. Look at, I'm going to give you a crazy example. One of the best interviewers I've ever seen is Nardwar. If you don't know him, go to YouTube, right?
Legend.
He's odd, right? But he came up with a hook that nobody else was doing, and it made him a legend. So, be true to who you are, but come up and figure out what your hook is going to be, and then build that thing. Use your creativity in the business, that brain that says there are no rules. Because for all three of you, I'm going to tell you right now, screw the rules. There are no rules when it comes to making your own thing. Screw the rules. Do what other people aren't doing. Do it consistently. Be willing to critique yourself to be better, and be committed, and be willing to make an ass out of yourself. If you can do all of those things, Figgy, the world is your oyster. Don't wait for somebody to make a Black sports station. Be the premier guy who talks about sports, who also happens to be Black, and build your own.
Yeah, I agree. And to be clear, I'm more of a hip hop guy, so I have no interest in being a sports talk host.
But you could be, because you could say you might be talking to athletes about hip hop.
Yeah.
Now you're talking, right? So you'll be the guy that got access to all the athletes, but you don't talk about sports. You're talking about hip hop or whatever, right?
What we do now, yeah.
But see, the part about that is we could do something like this here, but it's so cut and dry. It's like you got all these, I don't want to say white people, but all these other people that really don't understand us like that, and they just won't roll with that.
Okay, but you're waiting for someone else to give you permission to do the thing that you want to do. You're sitting here doing this thing with me. Nobody gave you permission to do that. You have access to all that you need to build your brand. You don't need a radio company. Build your brand. The companies will come to you, my friend. And trust me, if you were an artist, I'll tell you the same thing. Don't rush out of here to get no major label deal. Go out here and build your brand as an independent. More equity you could build in your brand as an independent, the better shot you got for yourself when you get a seat at the table to get a phenomenal deal. So build your own thing. And building it is about, I mean, you can call me offline. I can sit and give you the rules of engagement, but you know, build your own thing, man. You don't need to sit here and wait for somebody to grant you permission to grace their airwaves when you have access to all kind of airwaves right now. Build your brand. This is the thing. If I could tell people one thing, I would say, please stop waiting for other people to give you permission. And they won't do this for me. They don't have to do nothing for you, but you can do a lot for yourself because it's all here. Yeah.
Okay. So a sports station is coming soon with Radio One.
Radio One has sports stations in other markets. It's not here in Houston, but our company we just acquired a big cluster in Charlotte. We've got adult contemporary stations. We've got sports stations. We've got pop stations. You know, where it makes sense, the company has expanded the brand for a business, right? You want to be able to provide many assets for advertising dollars. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's dope. I like that. I'm gonna have to check that out.
All right. Listen, guys, I am coming up on short time though.
Yeah.
All right. We can wrap it up. You got a question, Jazz, or you good?
No, I'm good. I'm gonna I guess tap in with Figgy so I can get that exercise for you about finding your niche. That has resonated with me and I really want to try to
shoot me an email. Shoot me an email and I'll send you back my cell. For anyone that's interested, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you for the honor.
We appreciate it. And again, that's Terri Thomas, Terri Thomas, my fellow alliterative named sister over here. You can follow her on social media. She's at Instagram, Terri Thomas, Facebook, Terri Thomas Inc., Twitter, Terri Thomas Inc. Very wise words. I really appreciated you sharing this with us because I think we're all feeling more motivated and spry in our steps now. So really appreciate it. I think, and I know we talked about radio a lot, but I think her advice will extend to all, you know, things you want to do if you're a creative person. So yes, appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.